Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens. This is Jake along with Scott, and we've ventured to the lively Shively here in Louisville, Kentucky, to Michter's Distillery, and we have two amazing guests. We have Dan McKee, who is the Master Distiller, and we have Andrea Wilson, Master of Maturation, and she's got another title, but we're not going to out-title Dan on this podcast. Welcome to the Bourbon Lens.
I think that's the best intro.
Dan, you're the best.
Oh, yeah.
You're the best.
No, Dan's been great. Andrea has just joined us here in the last, 30 minutes before we got this podcast going. So how are you all doing on the second day of spring?
Very exciting. The trees are blooming. It's beautiful outside. We're looking forward to lots of events coming back here in Kentucky. And I don't know. It's an exciting time. I feel like hopefully we can say post-COVID, hopefully that is going to stick. And, it's good to see people getting out, doing events again, drinking some whiskey. So I'm excited about what this year brings.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm really excited to see how the rest of the year comes about and getting to see people, see old friends again, meet new people, and then most important, enjoy whiskey with them. So
there we go. And it's 70 degrees. Can't beat that today.
I'm in shorts.
I know, Scott's in shorts. Good for you. I didn't even
probably
think
leave here and it'll be 20 degrees, but
welcome to Kentucky. That's why we get great barrel maturation.
Yes, that is true. The seasons in Kentucky are the best.
Yeah. And it's about to be Derby time. So will you all partake in the ponies any?
I'm a big horse racing fan. I love horse racing. I approach it from more of a bloodline perspective. I really enjoy analyzing bloodlines and kind of trying to figure out who has the distance, who can go the distance, et cetera. I really enjoy it. It's sort of a challenge for me. We're usually hosting guests around Derby time. So, we don't have the rights to anything at Churchill Downs for sponsorships or anything like that, but we do have the opportunity to have Michters in some great bars.
Yeah.
At Churchill Downs, which is wonderful. And so love Derby time, love, everything that it brings. It's a special time in Kentucky, and it's one of the biggest things that go together, Kentucky bourbon and horses. So love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not as in-depth there as Andrea is about the horses and everything, but I like to drink great whiskey, make some poorly advised bets. But, honestly, though, it actually, we do get to, have some events and spend time with people. And I think the big takeaway is just seeing the excitement in the area and what what the Derby does for Kentucky. It's truly special.
It's amazing. And I was talking to a PR company of all things, and they were saying this is supposed to be the biggest Derby in history. They have people flying in from all over the place. Top tier celebrities are coming back. Like, they're pushing record is what their goal is this year for attendance. So that's pretty amazing. 3 years, it's kind of all been in a damper. So we'll see what this brings. I'm excited. I like horse racing. I'm not the handicapper that Andrea is.
No, Andrea didn't say she was a handicapper. Andrea is a researcher.
You're going to get phone calls tomorrow.
No,
I was just trying to tell them if they want anything about horses, Andrea is your girl.
I'm with Dan. I cannot bet on horses. I can't figure it out.
I think it's funny because I actually pull out the program and I act like I know what I'm doing. So, of course, I've got to go to the front and learn what the symbols are all over again. And then I try to compare their practice times to like what tracks, and I go place a couple dollars and have a drink.
My horse always finishes last. It's okay.
No, well, there's always that one where I like put a little extra, I win it, and then I think I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then, so.
Yeah. My wife doesn't bet at all, but I went to the track one time with my work team, and they were like, do you want to call your wife and see if she wants to bet on something? And I call her, and there was something called like Blackberry Bush was the name of the horse or something. She's like, my grandma had a Blackberry Bush. She's like, put $50 on it. And it was, the odds were like 65-1. Guess what? It freaking won. And then I had to give her all that money. I was very upset about it. Because she's like, that's my money. But I'm like, I placed the bet.
You got a fee, right?
Yeah, I should have had a handler's fee or something, because Twin Spires made sure they got my fee for placing them.
I truly respect your enthusiasm there, but
I lost.
I've been married long enough to know that, the winnings went right to.
Oh, yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did. Yeah. But, anywho. And you all are not too far from the track, right? We're down here in Shively. It's probably, 10 minutes?
Yeah, not even. I'd say it's probably just a couple miles walk from here.
Yeah. So
You can see the big
The big
TV.
screen.
yeah.
The big screen.
It's the biggest outdoor sporting track sporting screen in the country, I believe. It's phenomenally large. And it's very daunting. I ran the mini marathon one time, and then you go get close to it and you look up, you're like, that's a really big TV.
There's people that just sit outside and watch the races on the TV.
I mean, they should. I mean, I would.
Better than being there.
No traffic, because traffic at Derby, that whole area is just poorly designed for traffic flow, but they do a good job. Anywho, now it's time to talk about whiskey. So which one of you two extraordinary people want us to tell us the history of Michter's? Because what a lot of people don't know is they think this brand popped up overnight, and it didn't. This brand has deep, long rooted history in the United States. So who wants to take the first question of where is Michter's from in the beginning and the revitalization of this brand?
Well, I guess I will take the question since Dan didn't jump in there. So the heritage of the brand does sit in Pennsylvania. So, a lot of great rye whiskey was distilled by a lot of wonderful immigrants, Scotch, Irish, German, etc., coming into the area, bringing distilling knowledge with them. Rye being a wonderful cover crop, they would take their excess rye grain and they would distill it and make spirit. One of those great historical distilleries was the old Shinks Distillery in Pennsylvania, which later became Michter's on its journey. Started there in 1753 with a gentleman, John Shink. He was making rye whiskey. Sold to Abraham Baumberger in 1861. And then it closed during U.S. Prohibition, so we were not making any whiskey at that location at that time. And then in 1934, it reopened, and in the 50s, it was acquired by a gentleman, Lou Foreman. And Lou Foreman actually renamed the brand after his two sons, Michael and Peter, and it was the merger of their two names that made the name Michter's. Sadly, 1989, the distillery closed. That was seemingly the end of Michter's. But the Malioco family had exposure to Michter's. They were distributing Michter's, saw that, the brand was no more, and they decided to acquire the abandoned trademark in the 90s and had begun an over 25-year journey to resurrect this brand. And I think it is a story of perseverance. It's a story of passion and, really the goal of making the best American whiskey. And I think it's been an amazing journey. I know I have a friend who's a writer, Sam Kamlenik, and he said one time, he always felt that the heritage of rye whiskey was in Pennsylvania, but the legacy is really here in Kentucky. And it's amazing to see how rye whiskey is really coming back and coming back strong now. After U.S. Prohibition, there was really maybe, a handful of ryes that were left around because rye fell out of favor. And now, classic cocktails are being made with rye, and there's lots more people coming to the rye category. It's a beautiful spirit. It's got amazing aromatics and tasting notes, and hopefully we're going to get into some of that.
Yeah, I mean, rye has taken off for me. I actually became more of a rye drinker than a bourbon drinker. Like on our, journey as a podcast 3+ years ago, couldn't tell you what a rye whiskey was when we started this thing. I could barely tell you what a bourbon was, and I was from Kentucky, right? Mm-hmm. It's just people assume hey, you're from Kentucky, you know bourbon. That's not a thing. And so I bought my Weller 12 at a CVS for $22 when I was 21 years old, and that was awesome. That's what I knew about bourbon. And now you get into it, and like you mentioned, the aromatics and the flavors on ryes, and all you can do with rye, I think that's the tipping point, right? There's so much. You have your Indiana style 95.5. You have Maryland rye making a resurgence. You have New York Empire rye making a resurgence. You have Pennsylvania rye making a resurgence. And so you have Kentucky style rye. So you have all of these different types of things coming together to make a really well-balanced spirit that's not just,
Don't say it.
a bunch of corn. which Scott loves. And I love bourbon. Don't get me wrong here. We're the bourbon lens. But like rye whiskey, like is just kind of been my thing because I like the flavor profile. It's just a little bit better. They stand out to me.
I think it's really interesting. We're gonna get into a rye tasting today, and I think that these points that you make about different styles of rye have been very interesting for Dan and I over the years as we've been out in market, and the number of people that come up and they're like, no, I'll just taste the bourbon. And I'm like, well, now, because Michter's makes a Kentucky style rye, really where the rye content stays closer to the 51% rye grain. And then we're supplementing with corn and malted barley to fill out that recipe. Helps really balance the spicy character of the rye grain, but you get this beautiful, then it's got some nice sweetness, but it's also got those beautiful baking spices, and people are like wowed by it. They're like, oh my gosh, it's got some floral, it's got citrus, it's got baking spice, it's got all these wonderful things all wrapped up in this little package. And they're like, what is this? And I'm like, this is rye whiskey, So while some of the higher ryes can be beautiful, they can also be polarizing for some people. Mm-hmm. And I always say there's nothing wrong with that. Like, not everybody has the palate for a peaty Scotch.
Yep.
Not everybody has the palate for super high rye whiskey. But there are other types of Scotch whiskey that are delicious, the same as there are other styles of rye whiskey that are delicious and very approachable. Mm-hmm. And that's what we try to make here at Michter's, is something that's very approachable as a rye whiskey for consumers. And it's rich and delicious and flavorful. I know that's one of the reasons why we chose this today, is because Dan loves rye.
Yeah, of course I love the bourbon. Goes without saying. But yeah, I've really taken I really enjoy our ryes, and I'll just say thanks for saying all my tasting notes for the first rye that we're going to try. But no,
I'll be quiet now.
I do love the rye. It's again very approachable. I love drinking the whiskeys neat, and it's something that when we always say we have a house style. It's very rich, complex, very well balanced, nice warm mouthfeel, and then of course very smooth. And as I continue to get older, I don't enjoy making faces like I used to, back in the day. I love our whiskey. It's very smooth sipping. And it actually, our rye, our US1 single barrel rye, when I do tastings or meet people, and as Andrea said, I'm not a big fan of rye, or I've never enjoyed rye. I've had more people walk away and say that was my favorite expression out of the whole tasting. And it just shows something that we're doing something special here at Michter's with our rye.
So we'll talk about rye, but while you're hitting on that point, you all have a nice display of all your whiskeys over here. That makes me a little jealous. But your standard lineup, right, is the single barrel rye, and then the small batch bourbon, the sour mash small batch, and then the US1, correct? That's your
blended American whiskey.
Blended American whiskey. So that's your standard 4 core offering that's out in the marketplace for daily consumption.
Yep.
Correct.
And as you mentioned with the US1 rye, it's a single barrel product, or like you said, the US1 small batch bourbon, the original sour mash, and unblended American are small batch to us. And that, there's no U.S. regulation of what small batch actually is. It just needs to be smaller than your larger batch, right?
Yeah.
We truly are small, though. It's our equipment can hold the equivalent of 20 full barrels.
Okay.
And so that's what makes up our small batch. So truly small, you have to have very high quality, consistent barrels to do that. And of course, you'll notice with all our ryes, they're single barrel. So again, you have to have high quality barrels for that.
Yeah. And so that leads me to get into the tasting a little bit. So if these are all single barrels, right, and you're putting out your rye whiskeys, like how are you all looking to keep the same flavor profile, or are you experiencing batch variants per single barrel that you put out?
So I would say that the best way to characterize it is we want to have a consistent profile that the consumer experiences, but there may be little nuances of difference between each single barrel offering. So, what you don't want is significant deviation such that somebody says, well, my bottle of barrel strength rye is way better than your bottle of barrel strength rye. You want them to be consistent, but like, oh man, maybe I got a little tinge of a hint of something that you didn't get in yours. And you want to be able to have those experiences because that's really what single barrel is all about, but for us, and I'm sure we'll get into this at some point, but when we age our whiskey, our whiskeys are aging in essentially 4-floor warehouses now. And, that's very important to us because what we're trying to do is we're trying to have continuity of the entire house. Whereas a lot of the traditional warehouses you'll see in Kentucky are, maybe 7 floors high. You've got the 7th floor maturing faster than the 1st floor because it gets hotter on the top floor of the warehouse. And then you start with all these honey holes and, all these deviations from the floors. And for companies who have master blenders, they can take barrels from different locations in houses and they can marry them together to make batches. But the challenge for single barrel becomes something altogether different. And because we're doing so much single barrel product and we're doing our small batches that are incredibly small, you think about that, the equivalent of 20 full barrels. I mean, there are some batches that the smallest batch is 1,000 barrels. It's incredibly small, and the attention to detail and the discipline that we have to have within our team to be able to deliver a consistent product is something that really, to me, is sort of the foundation of what Michter's is all about. And so I think we enjoy the elegance, we enjoy the nuances of difference, but we don't want significant deviations across, any one expression. And that's why we keep continuity and control around everything we're doing.
And I just like to add, as Andrea kind of forgot to mention the part of the distilling. She went right to warehousing. But no, there's, just starting at the distillery, the consistency.
I'm sorry. Maturing is about 80% of the work effort. I just want to go on.
It's that foundation of that 20% though.
I'm just kidding.
But Dan, you guys saw it back there. Just the consistency of every step, whether it's the quality of grains using, our corn, rye, malted barley, U.S. grade #1 non-GMO. So starting out with the highest quality, grains, and then you have the, milling, the mashing process and fermentation, and then distillation, just making sure every step along the way is consistent day in, day out. And if it's not that, as Andrea mentioned, obviously so much comes from the maturing side of it and creates such a beautiful product. But really, if I don't hand off something that is already at high quality as in regards to the distillate, it won't make it. And that's the thing that's wonderful here at Michter's, and we're very proud of is our quality standards. If a batch isn't right, we'll actually reject it and send it offsite to be repurposed into fuel ethanol, and it's painful. But if our distillate goes through extensive testing, sensory and like we use gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer, things like that. There's a lot of lab work that goes into it, and long as it meets our specifications, because every product has its own profile, so it has to meet it. And we mentioned that everything's either single barrel or small batch. So if it's not right at the front side, it's definitely not going to be at the end. and then we have to, deal with it then. So, and of course we don't want to put distillate that's not right, because barrels are really your most expensive part of it. So
Yeah, definitely. And what I noticed here, I'm just looking at the labels. Interesting proof point, 84.8. And so, one of the things we'll talk about, and that you all are famous for, is lower barrel entry proof. I think it's 103. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about it on our brief tour, and I wanted to make sure I didn't butcher that. I'm known for doing that. So you have lower barrel entry proof, which could mean that your barrels may only get up to 115, 116 over the life cycle, and then you got to bring that back down. So with that lower barrel entry proof, is that why this whiskey is proofed down lower, or for your taste and quality that you want to put out from a maturation perspective, does it just end up kind of in this where the whiskey shines?
Yeah. So every proof that is chosen for, other than barrel strength, it's chosen, collectively. We're tasting at different proofs. We're, evaluating, the things that are traditional, such as, color and complexity and viscosity, and how you experience on your palate, front, mid, and end and finish. We're doing all of those things. We're sitting with the whiskey for a period of time, seeing how it changes in the glass over time. We want to give it a robust evaluation, and then we're making a determination on what that expression's proof, as you said, where it's really going to highlight and accentuate that whiskey's best quality experience for the consumer. What you'll find, for example, is that when we go into at 103 entry proof into the barrel, we're going to come out somewhere 110 to 112 is sort of the range. It's like a bell curve. You'll have some that are lower, then you'll have a whole bunch between 110 and 112, and then you'll have some that tail off on the other side. When we enter into wood, we're going to be about 75% whiskey in the barrel, 25% water. That water stays in there. It becomes part of the reactionary process, and it's a contributing factor. Even if you just do something at home and you dissolve some sugar in water, that dissolves very easily, and it makes beautiful sugar water, which leads to simple syrup, which is used in great cocktails.
Or for the Monster Man in Men in Black. Because that's all he wants is sugar water.
Yeah, sugar water. That's right.
Wow, what a reference.
went old school there.
I mean, if you're gonna go all in, you got to go all in.
But yeah, it's the same kind of thing. So your wood sugars are going to dissolve easier. You're going to get, this aging process where you've got water, it's marrying, it's doing all kinds of work over time. And then when we come out of wood, we add over 50% less water than if we had gone into wood at a higher entry strength. So, for example, the law allows you to enter into wood up to 125.
Yep.
If we went in at 125, then we'd be coming out somewhere over 135, depending on how many years of age, we have on that cask. And then you're adding a whole lot more water at the end, which is nothing more than dilution at that point. And so we really believe in the process. There's even records here on file with the Filson Historical Society where, the gold standard for entry proof of whiskey was once between 102 and 105. And there were distillers in Kentucky who testified to the federal Congress of that fact. And so, we're kind of in that sweet spot between 102 and 105 at 103. But it's also, it's believed by a lot of people that low entry proof, when you go back and you taste those dusty bottles, a lot of people believe that's what contributed to that beautiful, buttery, rich, creamy, sweet confectionery character.
Yeah.
That, it is harder to find when you don't do the low entry proof. So I personally believe that. I think it's amazing. It also contributes to a smoother whiskey in that you don't get a heavy astringency from the whiskey. I think it's beautifully smooth and elegant. But yeah, the entry proof of whiskey, the 60s, it changed. The maximum used to be 110. Today it's 125.
Yeah.
So, I think there are things that have changed over time. And that's, for us, is all about making the best American whiskey. It's not inexpensive to do it. 25% of every barrel is full of water.
Yeah.
That's a lot more barrels and a lot more barrel spaces we're laying down than the average, distillery. So we're very proud of our low entry proof. It is the single most important thing that we do here at Michter's. We have 6 philosophies, and that is one that sits at the top.
And we do this for all of our products. So it's not just like to save money. We only do it for a special release or something like that. So it's something we truly believe in. It's worth the cost. I mean, we always say we have this cost be damn approach. Ownership is very supportive. If we can demonstrate that something in the process, even though it costs more or slows down the process, but it can improve the quality of the whiskey, they're definitely willing to review it, try it, implement it. And that's something that's really special. We're kind of a very, we're privately held. We don't have shareholders that we have to satisfy. It's, our ownership, and it's very flat, and we're, the communication channels are very small. Yeah. They're here all the time. It's really unique. And it's, as Andrea said, it's something that we're very proud of. It definitely, we have a little exercise that have some distillate that was put in the barrel at 125 to demonstrate. And as anything that we do, if it's for a comparison, we don't set out to make a bad whiskey just for comparison's sakes, but you can see the difference in when you're doing the testing and so forth. Yeah. And the nose, the mouthfeel, all of that.
Well, Scott, I don't know what you think, but I would have never said that this was 85 proof. I'm just going to round up, a little bit. I would have never said that. It's got a huge, rich viscosity to it. The mouthfeel, I think, was phenomenal. It's been a while since I've had the single barrel rye, to be honest, but it was very aromatic, had a lot of flavors, and it had that Kentucky style that you mentioned, right? Where you do get some of the caramel, the vanillas, but it was balanced with citrus, and light baking spices and like cracked pepper. For me, this might be one of my new, I got to go pick up regular bottles because of the flavor profile. It fit me well.
Yeah. I think that it's been a while since I've had this one too. I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's got a little chocolate to me, and I think it's like melted chocolate. So it's that mouthfeel that I get. But yeah, it's not, and you know this, but I'm not big on super high rye. That's not what I love. I love corn. So it's got that corn sweetness that pushes through, but then it also has that little kick at the end too.
Yeah. And I think the finish on it was really kind of won me over, was that cracked pepper note on the back end. That's really nice. It's like, hey, I'm here. Don't you forget it. Yeah. You just drank something good.
Well, and then if you're into enjoying cocktails or making cocktails, this was something that I learned when I, traveling around and meeting other great bartenders, and they love using this. I love a cocktail where you can taste the whiskey, but it plays very well with other high quality ingredients. And, again, there's that sweetness and that you were speaking, but all the spices and so forth, nice citrus, floral notes. Yeah. Again, to me, drinking neat though, it's so easy to sip on.
So as you transition from however old this product is, right? Let's just, it probably ranges from a decent amount, right? As you all, have been laying down barrels for quite a few years now. But then you step up to, as you adequately put it, the diva bottle of, M10, right? It has some mystique behind it. It's this nice looking bottle. It's got a wax dip. And I feel like people talk about the M10 Rye quite a bit. I hear it. I see pictures posted about it on social media. Why 10 years? And when you get this bottle, what should one expect at this more it's a premium product, right? That's what it is. What should someone expect when they get a premium product like this?
Well, I mean, obviously a great whiskey, but no. So
Keep it simple, right?
Yeah, right. Well, again, we always speak of all of our expressions, again, that rich, complex, nice, warm mouthfeel and smooth whiskey. But, something that we do here that's special, we don't age to an age statement. It's to a taste profile. So you'll notice when you have the upper marks, our 10s, though, they've always been much older than the 10-year that you see on the label, whether it's 12 years, 14 years. We've had even older. And the whiskey speaks for it. If you enjoy it, you'll notice it. You'll know that it's not just at 10 years. And that's something. So that philosophy of, hey, at 10 years, it's not, whether it's ready, or 11 years, it's not ready, so on. And I think that's what's special. But with this, it's been in the barrel much longer, right? You're going to get that more of an influence, a little more oak, whether it's some toffee notes, honey, beautiful floral notes still.
Well, that's the one thing I think that sticks out to me is it's more florally. When I smell the single barrel, I get caramel, maple syrup type notes. This one is more like stop and smell the roses, like a little bit. Like it's got more of those flavor profiles in it. And I would say it lends to more of that oak influence shows up throughout and covers up some of the rye citrus, but the rye baking spice is probably accented more. Me personally.
Sure.
What about you from a maturation perspective? Like, these get a little bit older. You're tasting these. I'm sure you have a nice flavor wheel that you lend to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, first of all, I think, one of the reasons that we chose the rye today is that, our ryes are highly regarded all over the world.
Yep.
People talk about them, you mentioned it. People talk about our ryes all the time. And I think it's because they are so exceptionally flavorful and beautiful. But there's this elegance about them. Like Dan was saying, you're not drinking it going, oh, dodge the oak, dodge the tobacco, dodge the leather, I'm trying to find my way through this. You're just experiencing it in a very organic way. And it's very dynamic, across your palate, front, mid, and end. And I think aromatically, I don't disagree with you. I think there is a heightened floral character that takes over in the 10-year rye. But I think that there's also it's a richer. It's a more decadent pour.
Yeah.
So like you were even talking a moment ago, just on the regular single barrel rye, just this chocolate characteristic. I really get a lot more chocolate and raisin and there's a creaminess to it, which I think is also exceptional. I always tell people it kind of reminds me of my grandmother used to make rum raisin ice cream. And my favorite part was like when the ice cream's melting in your bowl and you're kind of eating it like soup out of the bottom. It just reminds me of how vanilla and raisin and spice kind of all come together. And I think it's beautifully rich and creamy that way, but I think it's an exceptional whiskey. And I think, again, as we talk about the things we're afforded here to do, we don't have to bottle stuff when it turns 10 years old. We get the fortunate freedom to bottle things when we think it's really exceptional for the consumer. And I think that is when you buy into any bottle of Michter's, even our regular ryes and our core 4 bourbon, American and sour mash, we often age those 5 to 7 years old. So, whereas the law to not have to produce your age statement on the bottle, you just have to be a minimum of 4. So, some companies will dump at 4 years old and it's great. And that meets their quality standard, no problem. But for us, it's a different viewpoint. We're not trying to make the best quality whiskey, at the lowest cost. The only goal is to make the best quality whiskey. And that is an exceptional thing. I think it's what attracted Dan. It's what attracted me to this brand is these philosophies and the way we get to operate here really allows us to do something that we're super proud of to share.
Yeah. I think the more you talked about the M10, and she is a woman after my own heart. She started talking about food as characteristics of flavor. I'm always getting harped on because food makes me recall what I'm drinking, right? Like when you started talking about grandma's ice cream, I was like, you know what? I've had some times where my grandfather would hand churn some vanilla ice cream, and like those would be the flavor profile. So kudos to you, because food is everything with your whiskey. I'm sure you get food tasting notes, right?
Oh yeah,
that's my man, Scott. You're the oddity.
I totally agree with you.
I'll be honest. When we've done some food pairings or whiskey food pairings, and Andrea's talking, I'm just enjoying the food. So. It's pretty cool. I mean, especially with the ryes and how it can cut the fats, and whether aged hams or some real nice smoked salmons, and then with the bourbons and like our unblended American, whether you're trying some different like cheeses, or one thing that we enjoy is like a blue cheese with a piece of dark chocolate, and it works. You put them together and then follow it with the whiskey. It's a lot of fun.
And that's the thing about it. People think that, like, yes, the food science is a real thing. Yeah. And, you can get as complicated and as involved in it as you want to be, but you don't have to go that distance. You can be very simple about it. It's a Saturday night, get some rye, get some bourbon, sit down, buy some raisins and some dried apricots and some dried cherries, and buy some pecans and some dark chocolate. You don't even have to have all that. Just have some cherries and dark chocolate and pecans, and sit down with your whiskeys and taste them together and have a whole conversation about it that will last, a long time, because you're having fun and you're experiencing it in a different way, and it's so engaging. I just love doing it.
My pairing's going to be a little different. I'm going to grill a steak. You can keep all the fruits and berries over there, but
yeah. I didn't even think about, like, you were talking about rye with salmon. I didn't even think about that.
Typically, it is fantastic.
Typically, I'm like a white wine with salmon, but like thinking about the rye, the spicy characteristics of it with the more flavorful fish, I feel like that would go really well. My wife has salmon ready for me when I get home, so I'm going to pour another glass of rye whiskey when I get home.
There you go.
There we go. All ties in. So when Dan, this is a question for you. So like, as you come over here, right? I think they're in phase 2 as they're kind of growing and you're coming over. What was the one thing that drew you to Michter's that like, you were like, this is why I want to be a part of their future moving forward?
Well, one, just, again, I worked with Pam Heilmann. She's our Master Distiller Emeritus, Willie Pratt being our first Master Distiller. I worked with Pam for well over 10 years. She helped, mentor me and so forth. And so when the opportunity, we were entering into what we actually call phase 3, when here in Shively, the distillery was being built. I hired on as a distillery manager, but coming through the process, one, just meeting the team. I mean, Andrea and I are some of the very first ones. We were, under 10 employees when you and I were hired?
I'm number 7.
So I'm 8. So, and
now we have close to 80. So.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see how the brand's grown, and I've been here for over 7 years, but one, just meeting the people and the passion, and then understanding the goals of the future. When the distillery started, we started with just a few fermenters, but there was a plan in place to expand. And then, excitingly, just this past summer, we added a few more fermenters, and we're, running 24 hours a day. And, but I think through all of that, though, just maintaining the philosophy of maintaining that quality. And when I say that, when the distillery first started up, it wasn't like the very first batch went right into the barrels. There was extensive testing, and I can remember we had a mechanical issue with one of our pumps early on, and anyways, it led to bad fermentation, and we didn't put it in the barrels that I spoke about earlier. We sent it off-site. It was repurposed into fuel ethanol, and right there, that's where I saw the commitment to this brand, that they were willing to spend, or kind of essentially throw away thousands of dollars of spirits that could have gone into a barrel, and we could have seen what happened, but that's not it. It wasn't going to be in our profile. It's not like we're going to create just a label for something like that. But right then, early on, I knew that quality was of utmost importance, and it wasn't what a lot of what company is not about quality, but we're showing you the things we're doing to support that, and just right there, to me, really spoke volumes. But truly meeting Joe Malielka, our president, and meeting Willie and Andrea and the team, it's just seeing the passion. There's so many years of experience, that, they have. I know at one time, if you added up Willie, Pam, and Andrea, I think we're well over 80 years, I think, of experience. Who knows? A lot between them. But no, I mean, it's not every day you get to work with experience like that.
Yeah.
I'm over 16 years experience now, but we've got a lot of, great people, a great team. We have chemical engineers, chemists, Matt Bell, our distiller and executive vice president of production. He has a lot of years of experience. We have someone that works in the warehouse with over 20 years experience. So it's all over the place in every different department.
And that's one of the things that, like, as you all talk, right, there's a passion for being here, right? And I think one of the things Scott and I always try to do is to tell that story. And you all are just kind of pulling it out yourselves, because you all do believe in what you're doing, that, right? I feel like you all believe in this brand, and that's big. Like, 'cause like, I just feel the empathy coming out, right? Like, it's a true story. There's something you feel behind it, 'cause you all are helping a brand grow and revitalize. So I just, that's why I wanted to ask about that. I'm going to come to you to ask next too.
Well, you saw when we took that little brief tour. I mean, what was one of the first things I wanted you to try the distillate? I mean, we do it very well. We produce a very high quality distillate, and that was something that I was very excited to put out in front of you. And it was,
and
it's like better than the handshake when you come in. It's just, here's some White Dog.
It is. And he also was one of the first people we've interviewed that said, I listened to one of your podcasts. So Dan had me there.
He studied,
and I appreciate that. He's like, somebody's White Dog, you said, tasted like hand sanitizer. I'll have to go back and listen to the episodes, because I don't remember which one of us said that and when it was said.
There's been a lot of episodes.
There's been a lot of episodes. So I have 106.
You have a lot of homework.
I have 168 of them to go.
But start at number one and work your way up, because I'm not going to tell you which one it was.
Appreciate it.
I did greatly enjoy it. No, I just, everyone's take, there's so many different ways of distilling. And, of course, here in Shively, we use the continuous column still to doubler pot still. But, there's beautiful pot still whiskeys, and at our Michter's Fort Nelson Distillery in downtown Louisville, we have the historic pot stills that were handcrafted by Vendome in 1976 and were used at the Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania Michters. So we have a piece of history back in operation. We are producing distillate. It's not just a showpiece. It's really exciting. We've got 3 open top cypress wood fermenters, and then we're distilling on the old pot stills, and that distillate's going to have, we require that to meet our specifications. So hopefully years to come, that'll be, turn into something. But
no, 100%. And that's super exciting. If you haven't done that tour, like, I know it books up way far in advance, go do the Fort Nelson tour. It's really cool. I think it's probably one of the best tastings that you can
experience. Yeah. Overall tasting experience. Yeah.
That you can do at any tour. Like,
thank you.
Thank you.
Honest, like,
Thank you very much.
with the the nosing and the flavor, like in the different, eating. I know that may have changed since COVID, but like this is pre-COVID. It was absolutely awesome. And then the fill your own experience. I know a lot of people have done that since then, but I think you all are one of the first, if not the first, to do the fill your own experience, which is really cool. And I was sharing with Dan, my wife was pregnant, and I was like, I want to fill a bottle for my son when he turns 21. So there's like only 2 unopened bottles in my bar. And that is one of them, because like that will be for him. The other one is a bottle that my dad won't sell to me, but that's another time. So Dad, if you listen to this,
why do you have it then?
Because my mom said I could take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Safekeeping.
Yeah. I know who runs the roost, my wife and my mom. So I'm going to ask what I asked of Dan, like what drew you to Michter's? I know you have a deep, rich history in the whiskey industry. Like what drew you here?
So I worked for Diageo for many years. I worked on brands. I used to run their North American distilling and maturing business. I worked on Bullet. I worked on Crown Royal. I worked on George Dickel, just great brands and great company. Met a lot of wonderful people who helped continue to shape my career and my knowledge, and I'm grateful for all of that. I used to watch Michter's as part of the competitive set for Bullet. I thought what Joe was doing, I've known Joe for a long time, and have always felt like they are not a hands-off family. Some people own companies and they're just like, here, people go run it. They are not that family. They actually have a tremendous passion for whiskey, and they have a tremendous passion for quality and attention to detail, and the story. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, but they acquired an abandoned trademark in the 90s. Now, if we all rewind to the 90s, what was going on then? Nobody put value on single barrel products. Nobody put value on aged products. Nobody put a value on a rye, certainly not. There was only a few of them around at that time. And, probably the days of production, of course, the cross of a year, was not very much. And, we didn't have these bourbon clubs. If you had them, they were more localized. You weren't connected by the internet. You didn't post something and 2 seconds later, somebody in Australia is posting, or asking you questions about it. This community wasn't existent at the time. You had not gone through the resurgence of the cocktail era, so it was a long time ago, and things were quite different. And now if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to get into the bourbon business, I'm going to build a distillery, you're like, great, it's another one. Wonder what they're going to do. Back then it was like, it wasn't a booming time for the whiskey business. And to say you're going to get into the whiskey business and you're going to go about the business of resurrecting a brand is like, oh my gosh. And all of the work that they had to do for years and years. I was hoping Dan would share with you earlier, but he kind of fell down on the job over there.
Sorry, I was drinking.
Dan and I banter back and forth all the time, but they went through 3 phases of rebuilding this brand. And the first phase, they went around the landscape of Kentucky and bought old barrels that they thought were of the flavor and style that they would want Michter's to be in the future. That was the first phase. And then they started bottling. The first 2 releases were 10-year bourbon and 10-year rye. They really just wanted it to be 10-year rye, but the distributors said, you need to do a 10-year bourbon because we don't know what we're going to do with this 10-year rye. So those were the first 2 releases for the brand. But then, of course, once you start selling, you got to start making. Well, they didn't have the financial resources to build the distillery we have here in Shively. And so they went to a great Kentucky distillery that had capacity at the time. And they forged an agreement for them to produce our recipe on our behalf.
Oh, very nice.
They did that for a long time. And along the way, the plans were being made for the distillery. And we finally, they acquired this building here in Shively, which is not open to the public, but this is our main manufacturing campus. It was an old auto parts facility that closed during the economic downturn in 2008, 2009. They acquired the building. 2012, we got our distilling license, and we began producing here on our new operation in August of 2015. And so, there's been a massive amount of work in figuring out what do you want to be in the future, and then starting to build that over time and using tools like Dan said earlier, the gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer. That's one tool out of a toolbox of things that we use to help us try to get similar profiles as we have moved through this whole process of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So it's extremely impressive. And, I think it's the thing overall that drew me to Michter's was this passion for attention to detail and quality and what it means to buy a bottle of Michter's. I mean, that's Dan's seal of approval. It's my seal of approval. It's this team, this family's seal of approval. It means something. Like we really care. We come to work every day and we fret over the finest details, of things. It took Dan 2 years to qualify grain from our farm in Springfield.
Yeah, that was painful.
Because
That's true. Both of it. It took that long and painful.
But it means something. Like, I know there's a commercial out there, just okay is not okay. And that is really how it is. Like, we strive for the best. And if it's not the best, it's not going in the bottle. It's not coming in the front door. Everything here, we're afforded so many opportunities and so much freedom from this family to be able to do what we know is going to influence this whiskey. And it's a really special place. So it's a long way of saying I am very enchanted and very endeared by the Michter story and the way we make our whiskeys here and the patience that we have to do things in a way that we believe is going to be exceptional for the consumer. These whiskeys are not inexpensive. The US 1 bottles you'll find, somewhere $45, $50 in this market. The barrel strengths, 100-ish. Toasted barrel, same thing. Straight rye, 160 or more. And then you go, retailers can price them however they like. We don't get to control pricing. But, you think about that. If somebody's going to spend their hard-earned money, we want them to have an exceptional experience. And I think that's what really, is important to us.
I just love hearing that side of it, right? You don't always know what draws people to the brand. And that's part of the story is not always told. Like, a lot of times it's just focused on the whiskey, right? And the whiskey speaks for itself. But like, it's so good when you know the story behind the people that are making the whiskey. Because that every time that you all put out a barrel or a bottle, like, that's part of you that's leaving, and that you hope someone enjoys it because that's your hard work and effort.
It's extremely satisfying to know that someone, whether it's in the United States or, around the world, is enjoying a product that our team spent a lot of time and hard work and producing. And I'm a person that does take great pride in it. Andrea knows this. I mean, when we started, even as a distillery manager, I can't tell you how many 70-hour plus weeks we put in to get things going and training and making sure the distillate was right. And I wouldn't change it. And, I can look, when you meet people, I can, I love being able to tell my son what I do. And he makes fun of me when he'll, see a there's dad on, the internet or something. He
Yeah.
makes fun of me, but I know he's proud of me because he tells me, and
pretty cool.
yeah, it's
So we've learned about the exquisite whiskeys, and we have a good understanding of what the base is. And the part I will tell you that I did not know, I didn't know the 10-year rye and bourbon were the first release. So I learned something. Did you know that?
No, did not.
Okay. So I'm glad I wasn't the only person. So thank you for that history lesson. So now we're getting into these coveted whiskeys, because a lot of people fangirl, and I will say that, about the barrel strength and then the toasted lineup. Mm-hmm. So when you all, were coming together, you had this good straight rye, and you had this 10-year-old that could be whatever age it really wanted to be, above 10, then put out a different lineup, right? You added to the US 1 and kind of buffed it up a little bit. So tell us a little bit about how you got to wanting to put out a barrel strength, and then, even ratcheting that up a little bit and adding that toasted barrel finish.
I think one of the things about Michters that I would just say before we get to, into some of these details, is that I think what's really special about the Michters brand is that there's something for everyone and something for every occasion. And I think that's really, really special. So, some people may enjoy the single barrel rye at 84.8. They want to use it in their classic cocktails, and they love it, and it marries great with ingredients, like Dan said. Easy sipper right out of the glass, love it. Some people are like, this is a really special occasion. I want to celebrate with something that's a little more rare, a little hard to find. You want to have a 10-year product. Okay. We have a product that, says 10 years on the label, might even be older than that in the bottle. But then, you sort of find yourself going, okay, well, is there something missing? Well, there's a world of barrel strength drinkers out there that love, barrel strength whiskeys. And while, those same people will appreciate and say, you guys have really flavorful whiskeys, but I'm still a barrel strength drinker, you need to have something for them too. And I think that, that's kind of what led us down the path of having a barrel strength rye whiskey. I think it is, I think it's also interesting to compare them like we're doing right now. It really gives you appreciation for, the things that people talk about, but maybe you can't quite put your finger on it. When you can line them up like this and you can say, what's the influence of single barrel? What's the influence of age? What's the influence of proof? What's the influence of toast? Mm-hmm. I think that's amazing in and of itself, because that really helps you now connect with what are these processes that you're doing, and what is the influence that they have on the spirit? How does it change the flavor? How does it change the aroma? How does it change the texture, the dynamic experience across your palate? I think that's, what's really amazing about having a lineup like this.
Yeah, and this one comes in at 112.2.
Thank you, because you knew what I was going to ask. And I would actually say, if I was a betting man, this is probably Scott's favorite one we've had so far.
The barrel
Does he
strength?
win?
Yeah.
Does he win the bet?
Well, yeah. And I'm not one of those barrel strength people. Like I like 100 proof whiskeys, but this
the reason
it doesn't drink like 112.
Well, there's a note on here that I get. This one's corn forward. This one has a little bit of the corny note in it, and I know Scott loves corn whiskey. And
yes, I do.
Like, and this is not saying like I'm a hoity-toity like whiskey smeller or sommelier or whatever. I just drink a lot of whiskey. This one's corn forward, but it like has everything is layered underneath that. So you have to smell past the corn, like, which is kind of an odd thing, like in a rye to like say you have to smell past the corn. But once you smell past the corn, there's a lot of like more foresty notes in this one, like wet forest. Like you get a little bit of the richer, earthier rye experience in this versus that bright citrus lemon type notes, which I like. I like both of those. That's a really weird way to explain it, but I don't know if you all like.
Well, I mean, everyone's palate is unique, but what's interesting though, from everything you said, it just demonstrates the importance and the difference of what proof can make of that spirit. So it's the US one at 84.8. Now we're having it at 112.2.
Yeah.
And, obviously your experience was different. So it shows you there can be a uniqueness in it.
I think you said something interesting though, is that if you did this blind, I don't think the average person would think what you're tasting here is 112.2. That was the strength on this particular barrel, but it doesn't drink like that. It has it's not astringent, but it has so much flavor and it has so much body. And but I do think for me, the way it resonates, it moves into more of an herbal character. So you said foresty, but I would call it more herbal.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's this,
no, like we're in the same.
Because sometimes you use the same, different descriptors, and you're actually trying to pinpoint the same thing. But that's the way I identify with this whiskey.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're definitely in the same ballpark. Like you could get like tea on this one, even like a fresh bag of tea or something like that.
Yeah, it's less bright.
Yeah,
I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's not the typical like punch in your face citrus or
like the pops of flavor. This one lingers a lot longer as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the one thing I really like. So we were I was at Justin's, and we had sampled a few older whiskeys. And one of the things they talked about was like, now we talk about finish as like the Kentucky hug. But those older whiskeys, to your point earlier about barrel entry proof, it was about how long the finish lingered on your tongue and your palate. What I've noticed about this flight so far is the flavor stays on your palate for a very long time. It's not just on and off. And sometimes you drink it and you get this like burning sensation. And then it's like, either I want another drink or not. This one is just like the flavors linger for a long time, which is really nice because it doesn't burn.
No, I mean, you can taste through our lineup, and whether you're a bourbon person, rye person, you'll still see those same qualities from one to the next. So, and again, all of them are very smooth. I mean, even when you get into our legacy series of the Shanks and the Baumburgers, I mean, Baumburgers is 108 proof bourbon, and I can tell you'd have the same experience where you're like, that didn't drink at 108. So
I just know that I'm very sad that I didn't buy Baumburgers when I saw it like 2 years ago, like on the shelf, and no one knew what it was.
It's a sleeper.
Yeah, it was a sleeper, and now it's all gone, disappeared. So as we round into this last whiskey for the evening on the just tasting, toasted barrel. So toasting is really interesting. You all were way on this before all the rage, right? Like I would say you all maybe led the toasting category, but you all got onto this really early. So what made you all think about the second barrel toasting, or maybe it's not a second barrel? Like what made you think about this toasting finish?
So, there are several philosophies at Michter's. And one of them is natural seasoning and air drying wood. So we do that for at least 18 months, but sometimes up to 5 years. The importance of that is you're allowing the wood to sit outside and you're allowing it to break down naturally, which allows access to different compounds in the wood that you normally may not get access to, but it also gets rid of things that we're not interested in. So bitter, green, astringent characters, we can get rid of those, but it allows us to highlight other characters from the wood. Essentially, though, you are doing more than just physically changing the wood through a kiln. You're actually chemically and microbiologically changing the wood because, the wood grows fungi on it. That fungi then metabolizes different wood compounds, and that's the importance is you're transforming this wood for the cask. Very important part of what we do here. Lots of different natural air drying and seasoning profiles depending on the expression that we're doing. Then you move into toasting. Everyone knows charring, where you inflame the interior of the barrel. It's somewhere between, a flash char and maybe a 4. Sometimes a cooperage might have a 5 char. But essentially, somewhere a minute, 15 seconds is probably you're done with charring. You're on somewhere that spectrum. But toasting is actually the art of slow heating the wood over time, and different temperatures for different amounts of time allow you to break down different compounds in the wood that you'll then extract into your whiskey. We toast and char all of our barrels here at Michter's. We naturally season and air dry all of our wood here at Michter's as two of our additional philosophies. What's different about the toasted product line is we take the original expression, we age it just as if we were going to make it. So in this case, let's talk about the barrel strength rye. So just as if we were going to make barrel strength rye, we dump it. The difference is we dump it into a toasted only barrel for a finishing process. Now that finishing process is not very long. The very first release we did in our toasted line was toasted bourbon. We put it in the second cask the first time for 28 days. That's how long it was in there. So it's a very short finishing time. It doesn't mean it will always be that short. It depends on what you're doing. And every time we do toasted bourbon, the amount of time varies that it's in the second cask. Same thing with the toasted rye. Toasted rye is one of the harder products that we do because every single barrel has to be transferred to a separate second barrel. So it's barrel for barrel. So we're trying to preserve the provenance of single barrel to the extent that we can. That second barrel, the wood has been naturally seasoned and air dried for at least 3 years. And then we are doing a customized toast on that second barrel, which then, is ultimately contributing flavor to the experience. Now, I think what's really special about the whole toasted line is it gives you insight into the power of toasting the wood. And so when you come back to this question of why would you do it? If you go back to 2014 and you start to think about what was going on at the time, people were like, oh, let's take our whiskey and let's age it in a sherry cask. Let's go age it in a, some other type of cask. And there was all of this, let's try to leverage when the natural beauty of the wood itself, that was not really being talked about. Yeah. And the opportunity with toasting is you are unlocking the natural potential of that wood to contribute flavor to your whiskey. So, there are hundreds of toasting profiles, hundreds of them. Yeah. And you can really isolate and extract single characters, combinations of characters, things that you didn't realize. If you want to emphasize certain components, how do you emphasize them? And you can really do some beautiful things with toasting. And I think that that's what's really special, is that you're not influencing the spirit because a barrel had some other product aged in it. You're influencing it by the virtue of what these beautiful trees have spent a lifetime trying to develop. And you can now pass that, on to the influence of the spirit. And I think that's a really beautiful, natural thing. Everything here at Michter's is doing things the natural way, even with our rye whiskeys. We don't use any enzymes to help us get the, work through the cooking process to convert. We just do everything the natural way. And I think that's really special. So, yeah, I think this toasted is a great way to finish this. I mean, it's full of flavor and like marshmallowy goodness. Like it's sweet and tasty, but you get the rye characteristics on the back end that kind of stay with you. But that toasting is, I think, just does a little something extra to that rye.
And the proof on this one actually is on the very high side. It's 116.4. Would you have guessed that?
No, I would have said like 98.
Really? I mean, when, of course, we're on radio and everyone out there can't see this, but we have 4 of the bottles right in front of us. But look at the color. I mean, again, it's just a testament of those barrels, the, air dried season, the toasting, the charring. I mean, we didn't speak of it, but we do a heat cycle here. Of course, Kentucky's the best place to make and age whiskey, and then we add that heat cycling on top of that 103 barrel entry proof. It's just, you get these beautiful colored whiskeys. And
well, it's really funny you say that, because the M10 looks like the lightest one of the three or the four.
well,
it's probably different bottles.
Yeah, it is now. But I mean, even go back to, as Andrea said,
we've been enjoying.
And different reflection being in the Diva, but the, single barrel US 1 Kentucky straight rye there. I mean, whether it's 5 to 7, I mean, it's got that beautiful color. And
yeah.
Well, I know early in the podcast you had said about introducing people at tastings that are Kentucky bourbon drinkers, and you're like, hey, try this rye. And they're like, oh, no. The toasted rye has pretty much ruined me for rye whiskey. And it dates back very early in the podcast. I think one of our first recordings, I think it was unreleased. Very early on in the podcast, we did a blind tasting with one of our friends at Michter's Toasted Rye. I think it was 2018. It was in the lineup with some killer Kentucky bourbons. I think straight from the barrel Blantons and some very high-end stuff. And it was hands down my favorite. And I was like, why is that my favorite? I have no idea, but there's something about it. But it was that marshmallow characteristic that just had so much flavor, so much sweetness. And then to find out it was a rye, I was kind of pissed, because I was like, why is this in this tasting? And now I'm like, why is this so damn good? And it's a rye whiskey. But it was that. I just had to be introduced to a rye whiskey, because I had those negative thoughts about rye. What is it? Oh, it's an old spirit. Nobody really drinks it anymore. But I mean, it kind of changed my opinion of rye whiskey. Probably ruined it, because I just wish I could find toasted rye.
Not in these parts.
Yeah.
Partner.
But yeah, that marshmallow characteristic, that it's hands down one of the best toasted barrel finish whiskeys I've ever had.
Thank you.
So we're super grateful. You all are a brand that I have a lot of admiration for. I think Scott does as well. You all have a phenomenal presence. You all are awesome. People talk highly about you all. And so it was a great opportunity to get to meet you all at Kentucky Bourbon Festival. We didn't even talk about that. But that's upcoming. And this is going to be a plug for them, and they're not paying me for do this. But the Kentucky Bourbon Festival barbecue is coming up in June. Buy your tickets if you want to go out and meet some potential distillers there. Michter's may or may not be there. No clue. But Kentucky Bourbon Festival is back for 2022. And I know if it's there, more than likely you all will be there as well. So we'll definitely see you in September. But we're super thankful for you all to spend a Monday evening with us and share these great whiskeys. We look forward to seeing what you all do in the future, because I'm sure there's future innovation coming up for Michter. So with that being said, thank you for listening to another episode of the Bourbon Lens. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bourbon Lens. You can find out more information about exclusive opportunities at patreon.com/Bourbon Lens. And until next time, cheers.
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 Thank you all.
Thank you.